Welcome to God Answers Prayer. I'm Linda Cobb, your host today, and want to invite you to stay tuned for God Answers Prayer, the testimonies that come each time that we get together here. It's always such a privilege to meet people from throughout the body of Messiah here in New Mexico, and to hear their testimonies, to hear what's going on. And this also keeps you advised as to all the events that take place across the state and get to know some of the other people. Sometimes we get so caught up inside the four walls of the congregation where we fellowship that we don't realize what else is going on out there. And so be encouraged today, because we have with us Pastor Casey Goodson from New Life Fellowship out of Belen, New Mexico. And it's good to have you with us here today.
Thank you for having me.
So tell us a little bit about you. I understand that you were a public school teacher for a number of years, but the journey with the Messiah, I mean, how did that all begin? Were you raised in a Christian home, or did you come through other routes?
Well, I tell people that when I was a teenager, I was not raised in that Christian house, but I had a lot of Christian friends that were with me in school. Going through high school, I think I was drawn to Christians that had something that appealed to me. I knew that there was something different about my friends. One friend in particular at one point said, "You need to become saved. You need to be saved." And after a few years, I actually took that to heart, and when I was the summer that I was headed to be my junior year in high school, I became saved. I was just that teenage kid making that decision, and decided that Jesus was going to be my Lord.
And so that started the journey.
It did. I was a very eager kid at that time. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst, and that was me.
That's right.
That was me. I was that kid hungering and thirsting. I wanted to know more. I've always been a curious kind of guy, but I wanted to know more about what it meant to be a Christian, what it meant to be a follower of Jesus, and so I was very active at that time in my church, in First Baptist Church in Belen, and later came to Albuquerque to UNM, going to college here. Joined First Baptist Albuquerque and volunteering, helping with youth activities, doing camp trips, summer trips, and doing children's activities. I was a curious guy, wanted to learn, but I was a very eager kind of serving guy at the same time.
Yeah. It's always interesting to me, because we can talk about being saved, and that's kind of church lingo.
Right.
And so for somebody that is not brought up in that way, it's kind of like, well, what are you talking about? And yet, it's the reality or the realization that we need someone's influence in our life who's greater than we are, that we need to make Yeshua Lord of our lives. And so, it seems like, from the outside looking in, sometimes if you're saying this, that it's just a simple little decision that you make, but it has such earth-shattering consequences on our lives. And like you said, it's like you make that and say, I agree, I need you, and I am confessing you to be my Lord and Savior. But then all of a sudden, things begin to happen, and you have this hunger. You'd have this desire to learn more. It's a life-changing experience.
It is. I would agree. I would say that when I was that teenage kid, it changed me. And I couldn't have told you ahead of time that was going to happen.
Right.
I knew, like I had said, that I wanted to be more like my friends. I wanted the something that they had.
Right.
And I was very resistant for years. They witnessed to me, they ministered to me, but I was not willing to make that decision. And until one of my friends just said, "This is what you need to do. It's time," and that hit me, and it changed me. It changed me in ways that I could not have predicted at that time. It did make me more more curious and more willing to learn. I wanted to learn those church lingo-y kind of things
Yeah.
and what they meant
What they meant,
and all those things that kids that grew up in the church
Right.
were accustomed to, that they were used to. I knew nothing about, and so I felt kind of blessed to go in as a new Christian, to be newly saved. I felt different in a way, that I was, I don't know, fresh. I don't know how to describe it.
Yeah, yeah. Fresh and clean.
There you go.
Yeah, I always say, really, I remember when I was baptized and I was young. But I remember going home that night and getting into bed and thinking, I feel so clean. And, at 12 years old, I mean, how dirty can you really be? But still,
Right.
On the other hand, there is something very impactful that happens at that point. And your friend obviously was led by the Spirit
Yeah.
at that moment to say just the right word
Yeah,
that
I
caught your
believe so.
attention. Yeah, that's wonderful. What a great friend.
Yes, that's true.
So then now you have made your decision for Messiah, and you're following along, and you're involved in the church, but you're also teaching school. So tell us a little bit about that. I mean, you went to college, obviously.
I did.
And
I went to UNM, graduated in 1990.
okay.
And I think I looked at my profession at that time. Going into college, I knew that I was going into education, that I was going to be an elementary school teacher. But I looked at being a teacher as my mission. That was my mission field, that classroom. I graduated in 90 and went straight back to my hometown, taught school in Belen. Started with third graders. That very first day of school was quite interesting. I walked in, knew nothing about teaching other than what I did the year before in student teaching. Walked in and I had a girl cry all day long. And there was nothing that I could do to soothe it. I thought that she was afraid of me or afraid of school, being a new kid. And I knew of no way to appease her, to calm her. And I thought, man, what am I doing here? What is this job for?
Right.
But beyond that first day, it became a place for me to bless others and to be blessed. I taught school in Belen, ended up teaching for 26 years, most of those years at La Merced Elementary in Belen. 1 year I taught 8th grade math at Belen Middle School. So I got to know families, and I got to know many children of families. I would have brothers and sisters from the same family. I taught long enough that I would have children of some of my previous students that were still in the community come back. And so I think it really blessed me to be a part of my hometown community in a very special way.
So you decided to retire? Is that what happened?
I did. I taught 26 years. My son and my daughter were with me at my elementary as they were going through school. My son was a 6th grader in my 26th year, and I thought, now is a good time for me to be done. It's time for me to go home. And I felt very, very comfortable with that decision. I knew that it was time to retire. I was kind of leery, thinking I might miss the profession, miss the school, miss the people that I worked with, and miss the students and families that I worked with. But when it came time to actually retire, I was very peaceful about that.
And you knew what you were going to be doing when you retired?
I knew there was nothing for me to do when I retired. My wife and I actually retired at the same time, and each of us really were retiring, but I had no future plan. It wasn't like I was retiring to do something. I wasn't retiring to get a second job. I wasn't retiring to end up on the golf course or at the lake or something. I was retiring without that place to be. And so for 3 months, I had pretty much a typical teacher kind of summer of there's nothing to do, there's nothing going on. But at the end of that 3 months, I had an interesting thing happen to me. My pastor, John Kennedy of New Life Fellowship Church in Berlin, decided that it was time for him to retire. And he retired 3 months after I did, and the church asked me to take over as interim pastor.
I think that's one of those heavenly setups.
Yes, it definitely was. I'm a great believer in this theme. It's a theme of mine. God has a plan.
That's right.
God has a plan for us as individuals, and I got to see that plan in action in my life of how God prepared me in recent years and throughout my life of bringing me to the position that I'm at right now.
Now, how long have you been pastor?
Just about 13 months.
Okay. Enough to get your feet wet really good. I mean, even though you've been going there for many, many years.
Yes.
So you already knew a lot about
I was not stepping into a new place, so I was
Yeah.
very familiar with the families there, the church there. But I'm learning a whole lot about the job. It's kind of on-the-job training.
Yeah, I can imagine. But you're willing.
Very.
So, yeah,
I'm
so
certain
that's-
that this is God's will, this is God's plan for me and my family and what we're doing.
Yeah. And you have a heart for the people. You know,
Yeah.
you've known these people for many years, like you said, and their children, and so that's wonderful. So tell us a little bit about the church itself for people
Okay.
that may be in the area, may be looking for a place to settle in, and tell us a little bit about New Life Fellowship.
Well, our church was started in 2003. It's a Southern Baptist church. We're in Berlin, just off of I-25. We're actually next to the freeway there, south of Berlin High School. We are a mixed congregation right now. We have a lot of older retiree kind of people that are at our church, and we have a lot of young youth, teenage kind of kids at our church. A few families that go with those kids. But I think God put me there to bring young families to our church, since that's my background and the people that I know in the community.
That's interesting, because as you were talking, I was thinking about how nice to have a lot of older retired people in a way that have a mentoring ability for those younger ones that come
Yes.
in, and then, you know, the generational thing that happens, if we let it. You know, unfortunately, I think sometimes that things get compartmentalized and people don't mix together between the generations, but it's very healthy if you can have that going on.
I think there's a ratio there of a healthy church in those age demographics, but there's also a health there in the activity of those groups.
That's right.
I think our older people are very active in supporting ministries in the church and active in reaching out to those families. Our name is New Life Fellowship, and we take that fellowship very seriously.
That's great. And so what ministry plans do you have for the church?
Well, being a retired teacher and knowing that there's a need in our community for academic support for students and just a help for families, we've started a ministry Wednesdays after school. It's an after-school program for students from elementary to high school to come into our church, and we use those older people of our church as those mentors. They become the teachers, the tutors, those people to support our families.
And is it just the families in the church, or is it open to others?
It is open to the whole community.
Okay.
There are people coming from elementary schools around Berlin. There are people coming from our middle school, people coming from our high school. Of course, there's kids that are coming from families within the church, but we're receiving a lot of families from outside of our church. And that's something that I think is a goal, is to use the after-school program as an outreach. There's a ministry need for these kids to receive support, for these families to get help, but there's also a place that if God leads them, that they can find a home with us.
I think about the number of kids that are latchkey kids, you know, that don't have anybody at home when they go home after school, and those that do need that help, sitting down, somebody to sit down and help them with their homework too. And the one thing through the years that I have discovered, you know, and I'm sure you know this as a teacher, people have different ways that they actually learn. You can't just have one method and think that you're going to reach everybody. It takes different ways of explaining things, and that's why I think tutors are so important, because sometimes somebody might explain how to solve a math problem and you don't get it at all.
Yes.
But somebody else can come along and they just come at it from a little bit of a different direction, and boom, all of a sudden it makes all the sense in the world. So I think it's beautiful so that you have that opportunity to reach people, and it gives these young people a sense of success, of accomplishment when they really get something.
It does. It does.
Yeah. Well, we're going to talk more about that in just a moment when we return from this. So you just said something to me that it sparked something inside of me, because not only is it true in our lives today, but we know that Yeshua was, he was raised by a carpenter.
Okay.
And you said a good teacher has many tools in their toolbox. Can you expand upon that?
I can. Throughout my career, I noticed something. Students would come through my classroom, and they would know how to do a math problem, or they would not know how to do a math problem. And it all came down to either they learned this one way of doing this math, or they didn't learn this one way of doing this math. And I think a lot of kids relied on one way of solving a math problem. But it was my intention, my theme, that it was my job to give those students a toolbox, to give them a background where they could have many different methods to solve, say, a math problem, give them a lot of variety, but yet teach them that there are some tools in that box that are more appropriate for certain jobs. But there's a wide variety of tools available to you. And I think that created a deeper education, a deeper understanding in those students. I think sometimes we get locked in to, we're going to do this thing one way, we're going to attack this problem one way, and we don't think of alternate solutions. We don't think of alternate ways, and it's like a toolbox. You can use a crescent wrench, you can use an open-ended wrench, you can use a pair of pliers, all to change a screw, but yet some of them are better than others, but yet they all get the job done.
Right. That's very good. So in the process now, how long have you had this after-school program? It's now in process, right?
We started at the beginning of the school year, so we are about 12, 13 weeks in right now. We started in August when school started in Berlin. We had a lot of our older folks at church that were very, very eager to volunteer and to help, but we were lacking students. Tried getting out word in Berlin through contacts that I had as a retired teacher, talking to folks in the district, talking to teachers in the classroom, administrators, got word out and started getting some responses, some families that were interested. But an interesting thing happened. Parent-teacher conferences were held, that kids got report cards. And once families found that grades were lacking, things weren't as well as they hoped, our attendance grew. Imagine that. Once parents found out that there was a need, the teachers that I knew, the people that I knew that I had notified about our program, really started letting families know that we're a support for you. Our ministry is there to help, and I've seen a lot of growth here in the last few weeks because of that.
So in the process of these young people coming, I mean, they're still coming.
Yes.
And it's now they don't come just to get help with homework or to be tutored, right? There's
No.
more to it.
We have food that we offer.
Okay.
Kids come for meals. We give them snacks for that after school time. That kind of opens the door for some of those families. You know, you were talking about latchkey kids, and some of those kids may need other support other than academic things.
Right.
We have a lot of people in our church that have a lot of talents, artists, musicians. We have a man in our church that is taking one of our high school students, and that Wednesday after school time, he's teaching bass guitar, you know, how to play a guitar.
That's wonderful.
So we have other things that we have people that can help with. Our tutoring has become kind of our keystone thing, our main event, I guess.
Right.
But yeah, we have other things that we can help with those students.
That's it. I think about, you know, how the arts and things within the schools have been diminishing because of funding and various reasons, but it's almost like you've hit upon an answer here for your community where they can pursue some of these things through extracurricular activities. And what a blessing for the folks that have those kind of gifts to be able to pour into a young person and encourage them. I mean, if you can find something that excites them and that they can learn, then the scope of learning's got to increase across the board.
Well, I would agree that those extracurricular kinds of things have decreased in New Mexico recently. If it's not on the park test, it's not an emphasis anymore. Music, art, those kinds of things have
Right.
definitely lost its emphasis in the classroom. And we have a congregation that has background in those areas. We have people that are willing to use those talents to step up and be mentors with those kids. And I think that's a double blessing. I think it blesses the children and blesses those who receive that mentorship, but it also blesses our people in our church who get to be servants, who get to be ministers in a new and kind of different way, in a very familiar way to them, that they get to use their talents that they've had, but yet use it in a different way, that there's this student, this 10-year-old, 12-year-old kid now sitting across from you, that you get to teach how to strum a guitar, or you get to teach how to paint, or whatever it may be.
And you know, and for the kids, these are probably like aunts and uncles or grandparents. There's some things that a grandparent can do to reach a child.
There's a certain license there with grandparents.
Well, there is, and I think, yeah, that they can say things to the kids sometimes that maybe the parents have tried, but it didn't work, but there's just I want to say a softness.
The perspective is different.
It is different, yeah, through years of experience. So how has the church actually responded now to this program?
Well, I'll tell you a funny story. About 6 months before we started, God had kind of laid this plan on my mind, and it really had me thinking about taking my background in education and where I'm now placed in charge of this church, and putting those two things together. And on a Sunday morning, I broached the subject during a sermon, and I think the sermon was about service, and I said, I actually have a plan that we can implement a specific service to our community. Let me tell you what we're going to do. We're going to have, and at that time, I was talking about high school students. I said, we're going to have high school students coming into our building. We're going to have them eating. We're going to have them getting help with their math or with their social studies, their academic things. We're going to teach them how to paint. We're going to teach them how to play musical instruments. We're going to show them how to use our computers or whatever we can help them with. And when I gave that sermon, I looked across at our people, and I saw a lot of large eyes. We're going to do what? And I thought, well, there's a reason we're 6 months out. I'm going to work at this, and we're going to not just prepare in logistical things. We're going to prepare us. We're going to prepare our hearts, and prepare God's plan here. If God's plan is that we help and minister to these students, then it's my responsibility as a pastor to help prepare you all. And so for 6 months, I think in little ways, God led me to prepare the congregation and say, you know, here's my plans, and here's the way I think it'll work, but you tell me what God's doing with you. Is God working with you? And it was interesting that there were some folks at our church that were very unsure about being volunteers, that didn't see themselves being able to help. But when the time came 6 months later, those are the people that we have. Those are the people that come and are faithful to do their weekly ministry.
Wow. You know, and I think about the fact that a lot of times churches are just used on Sunday morning, maybe Sunday night, maybe midweek, you know, that the building is there, the resources are there.
Right.
And why not be open to the community and have a bigger impact on the community?
Yeah, I think it's a dangerous thing that churches become kind of their own walled off kind of community of we're a church and that's what we do. I think a church needs to reach out to its community to find areas of need in their community and use those needs to minister.
Right.
and be that attractiveness to bring people to the gospel story. You may not win some hearts by going out and preaching, but if you win some hearts by helping, by supporting, by ministering, I think that preaching and that gospel story will come.
And the community has obviously responded, like you said, after the first report cards came out. But now, you also have youth programs for
Yes.
your church, right?
Yes, we do. I have a very active, hardworking youth pastor, Gene Courier, who has really been growing our youth group. As a matter of fact, kind of at the same time that our after-school program was started, our youth group, Pastor Gene, has actually started a Bible study at Belen Middle School. They meet Thursdays during lunchtime, and that group is growing.
That's wonderful, because I mean, I was just going to say that as young people come to these afternoon programs, then, you know, that may play into them wanting to become part of a youth group if they're not already involved elsewhere, or even if they are, maybe, I don't know, you know.
Right. That's why we chose to start with 1 day a week right now. We're doing Wednesdays, and we would like those kids to get to a point where they could tie in to our youth group, who has, you know, midweek Wednesday activities. So if those kids come and would like to stay, they're welcome to. We have an evening youth group that meets and does Bible study and activities. So our hope is that those families will feel comfortable to start coming to those church kind of regular activities of Bible studies and youth groups and worship services.
I was just thinking about, as we talk about opening the church doors to the community, or for other activities. And there are a lot of, usually they're the larger churches that are, they have whole ministries that are reaching out to different aspects of society around. But, our youth are the greatest investment that we have for our future. And so, to be able to pour into these lives and to pour hope. There's nothing worse than feeling defeated just as you're beginning your life, whether it's a math issue or you're having difficulty in some subject. And sometimes it's going to be some kind of emotional thing that's going on that is blocking the understanding, maybe, or their ability to concentrate on things, depending on what goes on. So are you finding that some of these students even begin to open up to these people that are working with them?
Somewhat. I think we're kind of new
into it, yeah.
But there are those relationships that are building with our volunteers, with the people that are helping. It's interesting to hear them kind of talk about those things that you're asking, to hear those volunteers surprised at those relationships that are building. We'll have returning students that'll come from week to week to week, and be partnered up with a specific volunteer, a specific tutor, and hear them talk about that relationship and how that relationship is growing, and the things that they can feel free to talk about. It is a process, and they're seeing that now.
Yeah. Well, and let's face it, word of mouth is probably the best advertising that you can ever have.
That's
and
what we're hoping.
As these relationships grow and students share about what's happening with them, and they encourage others, like you ought to check this out, then it should increase. And like you said, now you're going from it's the high schoolers. What are the ages now?
We are taking elementary. We're going from, right now we have all the way from kindergarten student that is coming up to high school, junior. So we have volunteers that can help in any of those grades.
And is there going to be a need for more volunteers?
There is. Been kind of, as the program has grown and we've been getting more of those students that are coming, those families that are inquiring and making those calls and asking about what we can offer, we got to match that with getting volunteers that can help. Okay.
And do they necessarily need to come from New Life Fellowship? Are other people welcome to?
No, actually, no. I would say that my initial idea was to kind of give our church something to minister to do. But no, I think people from outside our church could also be growing in that way and become connected.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk more about some of this and the impact on the community right after we come back.
Thank you.
In talking about this after-school program, and I'm sitting here going, wow, this is an amazing thing that the Lord placed in your heart to implement there in the city of Belen. And I wonder how many other churches in other cities could take this idea and run with it. And it may be that He gave it to you for that reason, to be able to, as you get settled in what you're doing, to share your vision with a lot of other people. Because what I'm hearing from you is the ability to change a community.
I think that's an open door that my church has an opportunity to be a part of. We can not just reach students and kids, but we can reach those families. We were talking about building relationships with those students. What I would envision is building relationships with those students, and then that building the relationship with the family and getting those family members to come into our church, to come in to build relationships with our people, and kind of in the way that I became a Christian, that I made my salvation decision, to see that we have something to offer, that's something unique that the world does not have to offer.
Right.
And that that'll build a curiosity in them. They would want to know, what do you have? What's different in your life? And we can use that to give them a gospel message. We can use that to get them to make that salvation decision.
Yeah. Now, with regard to this program, and I mean, as you go through the school year, are you looking forward to maybe summer programs or anything like that you might implement?
My wife is our VBS director.
Yeah.
and VBS in our house is pretty much a 12-month program. She's always planning and always preparing for that summertime. I would love to see a connection between those two. I would love to see those kids and those families connecting, not just for 9 months out of the year. Do that throughout the year.
Yeah. Now, I know that on the screen they've been showing your website address and your email address. And if there are some pastors or people out of some other churches around that have been listening to this program today and they're thinking, hey, maybe in our community we should do something like that, is it okay for them to get in touch with you and talk to you?
Oh, please do. Please use that email address.
Okay.
Let me know if you would like some ideas or some support. But also let me know if anybody would be willing to help us.
Right.
We were talking about needing help. I'm sure that there are people that are looking to use some of the talents that they might have. We're an opportunity.
Yeah. The thing with retirement, it can be a blessing or it can be a curse to a lot of people. Sometimes they leave a vibrant career, or at least something where it was more structured and they felt useful. And for maybe a while, it feels like, oh, wow, I'm free and I can do whatever I want to. But then they're like, well, what
Gotta
use?
fill that time.
Yeah, and what am I doing? Am I making a difference? And I think as you get older, that's kind of the question you start asking is, what have I done in my life that has really made a difference? And sometimes we don't see it so clearly, but there are opportunities to continue to make a difference. It's just different. It's not going to maybe look the way that we think it's going to look. But to be able to use those skills that they've honed through the years, working at whatever they did, whatever kind of an occupation they had, and to be able to use those things to encourage young people and to pour into their lives. I mean, at my age now, and I'm looking back and I'm thinking, yeah, our future leaders are the ones that are in our high schools, in our colleges, and actually we want to reach them as young as possible to be able to pour into their lives the hope and the love and the undergirding of saying, hey, you are special because God made you special. All of us are special, and He's given each one of us something that He's desiring from us to further His kingdom, and you can make a difference with your life, and helping them to discover what that thing is, because how many times are kids going to school and they have no clue about what they want to do once they get to college?
Right. I think you're right that there's a future there, and we are part of building that future. The children that come to us will be those future leaders. They will take the generation ahead of them. They'll take their place, and so we have that opportunity. As pastor, I frequently hear a complaint of how society is declining, how things are not the same as they used to be. Let's do something about it. If that's your opinion, if that's the way that you think society is going, let's do something about it. let's work with those children. Let's actually build some lives, and that doesn't need to be on a grand kind of scale. That can be one-on-one.
Yeah.
You can build that life, and there's a ripple effect to that. That one person's actions can change a life, and then that next life can change other lives. We don't know the future and what that future may be, but we know that we have a calling. We have a calling to serve, to minister, to witness, to evangelize. We have the Great Commission, and I see that in Belen right now, children are our opportunity to use that.
Yeah, I'm thinking of the scripture, Yeshua repeated to the rabbis, and it was like, the first commandment is love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, and with all your strength. And the second one is love your neighbor as yourself. And that's what I'm hearing coming from you. Now, you mentioned a son. Do you have just the one, or do you have more?
I have a high school daughter, a junior at Las Lunas High School, and an 8th grade son in Las Lunas Middle School.
Okay, so you are, they're probably giving you some pretty good feedback too, don't they? With regard to maybe, the responses of the kids in your church, or their friends.
They're my inside track on what our youth are like today, yes. But I got to put a plug in for them. They're my volunteers.
Really good.
My children are very good students, very knowledgeable, very smart kids. And so I think our program that we're doing right now is an opportunity for them also.
Yeah.
And it's nice to see them helping and doing things in this ministry.
That's very interesting. Yeah. So, I mean, other young people could get involved as far as helping in various ways.
I would like to see some of our high school students in Belen coming out and being those volunteer tutors to help with younger kids, to say, I was at the middle school, I saw that work, let me tell you how to work on that. I see so many opportunities for service, for volunteering. There's open doors in many different directions.
Yeah, it's always interesting to watch, because especially the little guys, when they're around the older students, they idolize them.
Oh, they do.
And so to have that kind of a dynamic going on, and somebody that they can look up to and emulate, wow.
Yep, those little kids, those young students, they'll look at those older kids and be in awe of them.
Especially if they pay attention to them.
The older kids will have an audience that sometimes they don't realize. That those younger kids will be watching them and seeing what they say and what they do, and not even be aware of that. But that they play that, they're put in that role of that part of being a mentor, whether they realize it or not.
That's so very true. Now, tell me about your times that you have service and any other programs that you've got going on there at New Life Fellowship.
Well, we meet Sunday mornings at 9:30 for Sunday school.
Okay.
We have adults all the way down through children meeting for Sunday school. 9:30 to about 10:30, that Sunday school will meet. At 11 o'clock Sunday morning, we have our regular worship service time with music and message. That 10:30 to 11 o'clock time between the two, I think that's our fellowship of New Life Fellowship, where folks get to come in and really catch up on the week and talk to people that they hadn't seen and just kind of love on each other. I would say that's a characteristic to describe our church, is we're a very loving, friendly church. As a matter of fact, Pastor John Kennedy, when he started our church, one of the first things that he implemented was that we would have a monthly potluck. So the first Sunday of each month, the church will meet for worship service, and after that service time is over, we get to go and share a meal.
That's great.
And that's an interesting time to see those relationships built in ways that just showing up at a worship service or even
Right.
even a Sunday school or small group kind of time would not do. We also have Wednesday 5:30 kind of time where those meals that the kids got to eat while they were there for tutoring are available for our folks. And then at 6:30 we have a Bible study for adults and youth group that meets, and our children also meet at that 6:30 time.
Great, okay. And again, you're located where in Berlin?
We are on Christopher Road, which is just south of Berlin High School, just off of the freeway in Berlin.
So how has this position now, and the transition you made from being a teacher to being a pastor, how has it impacted your life so far?
Oh my gosh. I see that God was preparing me in my life through my job and through my church to actually be in this position that I'm in now. I see that God is using me to do things that I would not have foreseen, a year and a half ago. I tell people that one of the surprises of this position that I would not have seen myself embracing is a hospital ministry. We have, like I said, we have a lot of older folks, and so there's a lot of hospital visits that I make, and that was the one thing going into the job that was very worrisome for me. Yet I've learned that God's got a purpose for me in that I'm there to be blessed, not to just be a blessing, not to minister, but there's something that I receive in those visits and those times where people need that ministry.
Well, that's wonderful. And then, of course, just learning that you want to grow.
That's true.
Grow spiritually, but also grow in the numbers of people that join in with the fellowship and bring their unique giftings into the mix of what is New Life Fellowship.
Yes.
That's awesome. Thank you so much
for
coming with us
having
today
me. I appreciate that.
and joining with us. And if you are in that area and you're looking for a home, a place to belong, a family to join, then get in touch with them there and go by and check it out. I believe that every congregation is a fellowship, and you have to find the right family that you're supposed to be a part of to bring something that you have into the mix. And for those of you today that have a need and you need prayer, please give us a call at 345-4165. It is always a blessing to be able to pray with you, to stand on God's Word for whatever need that you may have. And we want to thank you for your continued support of Sun Broadcasting, and especially your prayer support today. And may the Lord bless you and keep you. May He make His face to shine upon you. May He lift up His countenance upon you and give you His everlasting peace. Be blessed today. Shalom, shalom.
Well, praise the Lord. It's such a blessing what Pastor's ministry is doing to be able to help the children, to provide a safe place for them, and to provide that tutoring that they need. And that is something that each one of us needs to be able to do, to be able to think about our children, pray for our children each and every day. They live in a world where sometimes they can't even grow up as a kid and feel like a child. But God wants them to be that child that He loves, that He knew before they were even formed in their mother's womb. So today, take some time to be able to pray for the children around the world, whether it's here in the United States or in Africa, that God would just have a special hedge of protection